All right, what's going on, you guys? It's your boy 3 and this thing, baby, representing TKOG. Today we're gonna be talking about hand traps again. So I actually started the first episode in that season where we were actually talking about hand trap mentality, where and when to use it. And that video is pretty in depth. It didn't get a lot of views, but it is a gem, so you definitely should look that up on my channel. Now I think I'm gonna explore the more nuanced interactions with specific decks. The first one was more widespread and super generic, like it was applicable in a lot of matchups, but how you hand trap is predicated to the matchup, right? A well-timed hand trap is going to be at a different point in every single matchup. So we're going to be talking about Momento. We're just going to go over some simple coverage. Memento is an up-and-coming, very powerful deck that's only going to get better in the future, and it has a lot of different pivot points, and it's really strong. The inboard's crazy, bro. The inboard's pretty disgusting. Like, I don't think anyone's going to have a good time. And Momento can full combo through a lot. It's actually really hard to nib this deck as well. Yeah, so we're going to talk about it. So, like, we're going to talk about the specifics and the nuances, right? So let's pull out Fusion. Let's pull out Horsey. Let's pull out Sleepy. Let's pull out our Bone Party and our Dark Blade. These are kind of more or less cards that you need to play around for the most part. The reason why we have Sleepy in this category, because Sleepy can be an extender in the context like of going second with this deck, being able to like force interaction, crashing your stuff through battle. You know, there's a lot of ways that you can get Sleepy to work, and Sleepy proccing can result in the full combo anyways, even after you've checked all the boxes. So like, I'm gonna be the Memento player, right? And let me just pull out like the Ash, the Nib, and just Imperm can be the placeholder for like Veiler, Mourner. They're all effect negation hand traps, but this is the best one. These are the most widespread, generically applicable hand traps that you should respect the most. Game 1, Game 2, you probably want to respect cards like Droll, Ogre, and Shifter even more. Some decks don't even mainboard Shifter, like the Sprite deck will probably side in the Shifters, for example. So yeah, there's just stuff that you want to be mindful of. Ryzeal's coming out, that might just main deck Shifter. So there are hand traps that you just kind of can't really play around. Like, you can't really play around Shifter. You can respect Droll and make a sufficient board. I actually have a combo tutorial that I'm going to upload, bro. And it's pretty nice. It's a one-card combo that beats Droll and Nib with Mementos. So here we're going to be the Memento player, right? And let's say I start off with Dark Blade. If I normal summon Dark Blade, and we're just going to throw the Ash here, and my opponent ashes my Dark Blade. Now, there's two different things here. A, they're a bozo, and they don't know the matchup, and they're not respecting Bone Party. Or B, it's the only hand trap that... There's actually three. It's like... there's like a C. Or B, it's the only hand trap they had, and that's why they ashed it. So let me explain to you why, if they ash it, you can telegraph that the only other hand trap you want to respect are the weird cards like Droll and Nib, right? Maybe you want to play around Ogre to an extent. But the reason why you can play more frugally against specifically effect negation hand traps is because if your opponent had an effect negation hand trap and Ash Blossom, right, they would never ash your normal summon. That's incorrect, because a card like Bone Party would actually completely be able to play like frugally, because Bone Party resolving will not only pop a guy and summon a guy, and sure, it can be met with Imperm, but now that a card's been destroyed, you've turned on Fusion and Sleepy, right? So either they're a bozo and they don't know how to hand trap correctly, or Ash is the only hand trap they have. Now we're going to talk about in the context where they have multiple. If you normal summon Dark Blade and it is met with an effect negation hand trap, you still need to respect Ash because you haven't checked it off the list, and you want to play around it the best and most efficient way that you possibly can. Fortunately, if you drew a lot of engine, Memento can easily play through it. Like if I did activate Bone Party and it got Ash, but I already had Fusion, for example, plus another name, then I'm going to play through that easily. I'm going to use my 3 cards to combo through 2 hand traps, and it will be full combo, which is pretty nice. So, yes, there are nuances here. So, again, if I'm playing Memento, and my opponent Ash Blossoms my Dark Blade or my Witch, I can go ahead and concede the fact that they don't have any effect negation hand trap. So, am I going to respect Veiler, Impermanence, or Mourner? Not really. Not at all. I'm not actually going to respect them because I like to think that my opponent is competent enough to utilize their hand traps correctly. And if they're not, then the matchup was free to begin with, bro. So whether I misplay or not, they were free. All right, so I'm not worried about them, bro. They're going to lose to themselves. Like, honestly, literally. So just keep that in mind. Always when you're playing Memento, if they ash your starter, it's the only hand trap they have. And also, they don't have effect negation hand traps. So it's either or. That's why I said there's a C. Because if A is they're just a bozo. B is it's the only hand trap they have. Or C is it's not the only hand trap they have, but they don't have effect negation hand traps. So you're good to go off. And this deck can play into Nib pretty comfortably. Because now we're going to talk. This video is not going to be very long at all. Now we're going to talk about the sequence where we have impermanence, right? So if I, normal Dark Blade, or Witch, they most likely should not be met with an impermanence. If they are met with an impermanence, I can concede the fact that my opponent has another effect negation hand trap. They have another one, right? So they have another one. Because if they had only one, if anyone had only one effect negation hand trap, or even an Ash, right? Then they more than likely should technically hold it for Horsey, especially if you hard drew it. Ashing the Horsey feels really nice. And also impermanencing the Horsey cuts him off of a lot of lines. If you imperm the Witch and they open the Horse and you don't have another effect negation hand trap, they will be able to play very efficiently. They'll be able to pop Horsey and they'll be able to dump a card like Sleepy and Gaddock and they will be able to continue playing. So that's something that you should keep in mind. From the perspective of the person hand trapping the Memento deck and also the person playing Memento, if I normal Witch and it gets Veiler, they're either a bozo or they have another effect negation hand trap. Because if it's your only hand trap, you should even more so hold it for the Horsey. But if it's not and they imperm my Witch, then I know that they either have an Ash or another effect negation hand trap. But if they ashed my Witch, then I know they don't have an effect negation hand trap. Because the effect negation hand trap would trade with this. Well, Ash can still trade with this. But not only can Ash trade with Tatsu, but it also trades with Bone Party, which is the extender that plays through the hand trap. Right? Am I making sense here? I hope you guys are following. I'm trying to keep it as simple as possible. So in the context of Ash, we've explained that ashing the starter implies they either it's the only hand trap they have, they're a bozo, or they don't have effect negation hand traps and they have other ones. If they imperm your Witch, you still have to respect Ash, and you also have to respect the fact that they more than likely do have more than one hand trap. Like, this is not going to be the only hand trap, but it also more than likely can still be another effect negation hand trap. So if you open Witch, Tatsunoko, and Bone Party, this is a totally different ball game, because if you normal the Witch and they impermed it because they have the hand trap to check the extender, and you summoned, in response to that, you activated Bone Party and forced the Ash out, that's one thing. Now, there is another context to this, right? There is another nuance to this. You could actually be forcing a play when you already had Horsey and just summoning out a card like Mason Searching Fusion. But just in the context of hand trapping this deck, if you imperm here, and I chain Bone Party and they chain Ash, right? That means my Witch is still there, and I already open Horse, then I will not only be able to play through both of those, but I also will no longer lose to Nib, because even though I drew extra engine, all three of these cards equate to the same full combo that Witch will get you and provide you. Outside of the context that Witch is negated, you're still going to actually be able to go Horsey, pop, dump a card like Sleepy, and also a Gaddock. And because of that, you will be able to summon out your King. And not only that, but King can dump a card like another copy of himself, a Cranium Burst and a Fusion, or like the big guy. You will be able to go Fusion, pop, and then summon out your other guy to search your big guy. So King technically can just get you trap a copy of himself in Fusion. You can then just Fusion pop to add another Fusion, and you'll be able to make your Twin Dragon, grab your big guy, grab your Horn Dragon, and it's going to be pretty crazy because you'll add Field Spell off the first big guy that was dumped, and then when you pop in with the Fusion, you'll just get to Reborn, and then you'll be able to summon your extender, make SP, and make the big guy. And this is just all depending on how you play it. I'm fast forwarding with how I talk. I'm talking like a crackhead right now because I just don't want to waste time, because I'm not here to teach you guys how to play Memento. I can, but I'm teaching you guys about hand trap interactions with this deck. We're going to do coverage against like U-Bell and stuff like that. But in this context, that's how it works. So you want to ask yourself this: if your opponent only has Nibiru, does Witch beat Nibiru by herself? Yes, she does. Because there will be points where your opponent can nib beforehand, and that's just bad. Because you'll still be able to get Combined Creation out, and you'll still be able to get Cranium Burst. You'll still be able to get Fusion. That means you'll have 3 different points of interaction on their turn, plus the 5 monster negates through the nib. That doesn't feel good. This is why often against Memento, if you have nib plus an effect negation hand trap, you actually want to pair it with that Nib, because most competent pure Memento players summon SP. Fiendsmith Memento players summon Caesar and can force interaction earlier. But summoning SP, right, as a Memento player and then bringing out your creation, you're going to feel really good. But if they activate Nib and you chain SP and they chain Imperm, that can only close out the game pretty early if their combo sequence involves just the one card. If they have extra engine cards like Bone Party, they can do tricks with cards like Goblin to get extra foolishes and get more names to actually just resummon the combined creation again, because you can summon them as many times as you want. You just need to fulfill the summoning conditions. So that's pretty much going to cover it for the most part. If we're talking about a card like Droll and Lockbird, because that can be a really good hand trap against this deck. I don't have my Droll. Where's my Droll at? Let me just grab Droll real quick. This video is going to be over really soon. If you have Droll and it's just Droll, right? Droll and Nib are blowouts, and like single-handedly by themselves, they're some of the best hand traps you can have when you only have one hand trap. But if I normal Witch and I add Horsey and I get Drolled, right? What can the Memento player do? Well, you should know your lines, right? And not only should you as the Memento player know your lines, but if you're not a bozo, you also, as the opponent, should know the Memento player's line. This is why you need to study the format, because I can add from grave to hand with this deck. So I technically can still go Horsey, dump Sheepy, dump Gatic, and then go Gatic, add back the Sheepy, bring this out, and then I can fuse off into my big guy, right? And this leads to a myriad of different things. I'm under Droll, so I can get 3 complete and total dumps. Now, there's a big crucial problem with that, because you can dump your big guy, right, which is like the main guy of your deck, and you can dump 2 other cards. You can dump Trap plus another name. Now, here's the problem when you Droll somebody. This is the simplest nuance and like variant to the combo. It can get so much different and like better depending on like what you open and what you use. But just contextually, right, you fulfilled the summoning requirements for him, right? Skadoosh. And I guess since we're not going to be adding Field Spell, we don't have to dump the Cranium Burst, technically. We can just dump a copy of Witch. So what happens is, yes, you will not get the 5 monster negates if you do this specific line. But you will be looking at a Snatch Steal plus a Trident for 2 minimum. We're actually a Trident for 3, right? Through the Droll and Lockbird, and you're also, that Nib in your hand is going to be dead as well. So if you open Droll and Nib against this deck, it's one or the other, because if they're a competent Memento player, they will produce this line, which is very, very safe. It's very, very safe. Because if you count your summons, you had Witch into Horsey and Gatic into Sleepy, and that made this guy, right? Skadoosh. You're fine, right? You're totally fine. Well, actually, I could be wrong. I could be wrong. You should actually be playing in a Nib, because if it's Witch, Horsey, Gatic, Sleepy, Fusion, that's 5. So actually, if you have Droll Nib, you should be fine. You should absolutely be fine. I'm a bozo for saying that. I miscounted. I counted 4, but I don't know how to count. I'm a Yu-Gi-Oh player. I don't know how to read or count. So if you have Droll Nib, you should be definitely ending a turn. So Droll Nib is probably the best 2-card combination for hand traps against the Memento deck. Nib by itself is not enough, and Droll by itself is not enough. Ash and Imperm by themselves are not enough either, but sometimes can just cut off weaker hands to not be able to full combo. The thing with Memento you always just want to keep in mind is, more than likely, what you have, they're going to play through it. You're just always going to have to play through some type of board, and that's just what you have to keep in mind. So if you know you're going to be playing into talents, and you have an Imperm, and that's one of the hand traps you have, and you know you're going to be forced to play into talents, I would say respect the talents as much as you can, but if you have to hold a card, hold the Imperm to play into their board, because Imperming the creation can help a lot, because that cuts them off of Witch Snatch Stealing or going into Sheepy and Gatic lines that can get them out the fusion again and do a whole bunch of dirty stuff to you. The other thing with the Memento matchup, I guess, that we could talk about is not specifically about hand traps, but about cards like talents. If you're playing against a competent Memento player, they're more than likely going to do as much heavy lifting as they can with Cranium Burst and their silhouette trap of their choice, the rabbit target, whatever target they're playing, because they want to respect talents. But the reason why you want to respect talents with this matchup is because talents taking combined creation cuts off the Cranium Burst from being able to negate. It can cut off follow-up, and it also checks the mace, which is super important. So because it checks the mace, it literally takes away so much of the interaction that this board is able to produce. But because you know that's your weakness, you as a Memento player have to respect talents and should not play into it until you've done the most you can do with your Cranium Burst and your Silhouette. And then you can feel more competent to use your Combine to get out Witch and do Mace. The idea is to play into talents at the point where talents no longer gets them anywhere, where it's no longer going to progress the game state. You want to make them use as much as they can before you actually let them use talents on you. And that's just what you want to keep in mind. If you're playing the Apophis should actually be able to negate the talents. So you have even more, I think you have more leeway with that one. If it actually negates on res, so it could check talents. But if you're playing any other, then you're going to have to respect talents the most. But regardless of whether you have the trap, I just want to say it's so important to respect talents as a Memento player. The other card that you want to be wary of as a Memento player, and also for the person playing against Memento, is something that it's nice to know, is that SP Little Knight is actually going crazy, bro. It's crazy. SP Little Knight is very crazy against his deck. You have to be checking any method to SP. If you see an extra deck card, even if it's Anima and you didn't play an Anima Zone, get rid of it, because if SP hits the field, it's going to play around Cranium Burst extremely efficiently. Because minimum, the worst case scenario is SP banishes your combined creation and your deck crumbles and falls apart. That's the worst case. But also, just the face value of SP says, activate SP, I chain Cranium Burst, you chain SP, targeting himself in combined creation. Now my first effect resolves because combined creation is no longer in the field. You can't reduce his attacks, you can't negate the effect. And then also, you don't have to worry about Mace, snatch stealing your monster. So SP forces everything the moment it hits the board. And because of that, as a Memento player, you also have to play Keep Away with the 1,000 spot removals you have. With cards like Mace, with cards like the Creation King, and also cards like Guardian Chimera, popping as much cards as you possibly can. Cards like Fracture Dance, you have to keep them off of SP access. And that's unfortunately means because SP is so good against your deck, you're going to have to use your interruptions at times you don't want to, but you need to identify what you lose to and play around it. If you want to be a good player, that's a good habit to have. That's all I have for this video. Thank you guys so much for watching. Have a beautiful day. Deuces.